This meeting is being held via webinar. When called on, presenters and members of the public, please mute your microphone and shut off your cameras at this time. When called on to speak or to provide a presentation, unmute yourself and you may turn your camera on. During the public presentations and public comment portions of the meeting, participants may raise their virtual hand to be recognized if not signed up to speak. And as the counselors and everybody knows, I'll watch the cameras, and if you've got something, raise your hand and I'll call you. If this meeting is disrupted, we will recess for 5 minutes and then return. If that does not correct the issue, the meeting will end and we will be rescheduled. And now the Pledge of Allegiance, if everybody could mute their microphone so we don't get the echoing. And Sammy, Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes. Just a second. I pledge allegiance to the flag, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sammy. We'll have a roll call.
Yes, we have Mayor Smith present, Councilor Bell present, Councilor Alexander, Blaine, McConnell, and Lehman are present, and Councilor Fox will be joining us in about 10 minutes. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Comments. Kind of an elephant in the room for so many people. It's been a long week, obviously, for our country, and I think I just need to say something about what we do and the perspective of what's going on in our nation. Elected officials step up to serve our community by discussing and making decisions to better our community. And it takes courage to stand before our peers and voice our questions and our concerns, and then finally make a decision that may affect all of our constituents and ourselves. While our community and its representatives have varying and diverse opinions, and I think that's great, I'm grateful to our council and the citizens of Coburg for being able to express conflicting ideas and opinions with respect and civility. I hope and pray that we can continue to experience this civility in spite of what we see occurring at our national capital and throughout this nation. I pray that our community remains peaceful and civil, and I thank you, our elected officials, for your service and your courage to stand up and be leaders in our community. So thank you very much. At this time, we're going to move to appointment of council president. I'd like to read the city charter, section 19. President of the council, at his first meeting of each odd numbered year or upon a vacancy in the position of council president, The council shall elect a president from its membership. In the mayor's absence from a council meeting, the president shall preside over it. Whenever the mayor is unable to perform the functions of that office, the president shall exercise and perform during that time, unless and until a mayor pro tem is appointed. The powers and duties of the mayor as provided in this charter and shall for that time not be a member of the council. So essentially at this time, we need to appoint a president of our council. Councilor Nancy Bell was our previous president. Again, you're gonna, if I'm not available to run the meetings, that would be the primary task of the president. There's also other issues. We typically have the president be the one that signs checks if I'm unavailable. And also if other concerns come up that I may need some counsel or assistance with direction, I would contact the president. Do we have any discussion or questions, comments? Hearing none, do I hear any nominations for president? Hearing none, I would like to have a president. Are we going to continue with the one we have, or is somebody going to step up?
Is there any council member interested in being president?
I propose that we see if Nancy will take it another year.
I would be willing to do that. It's not too bad, except when the mayor calls. I mean, really.
You did such a good job. I don't think anybody wants to see it change.
But I'm very willing for anyone else that wants to do it. And so if there are people that want to do it, it is a really great experience. It's a good learning experience.
Well, I'm going to nominate Councilor Bell again. Just throw that out there.
I second the nomination.
I third it.
All right, let me get the pen out here. Who was the second?
Patty.
Patty. Okay. Any other discussion or nominations? Hearing none, there is a motion by Councilor Blaine and a second by Councilor McConnell to elect Councilor Bell as the city president. All those in favor, please signify by sticking your hand in front of the camera.
Aye.
I'm not voting, by the way. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So I have a vote of 4, and I assume Councilor Bell is abstaining because I didn't see a vote. 4 in favor of Councilor Bell with 1 abstention. Congratulations, President Bell. You're elected for another 2 years. It's actually 2 years, not just 1. We do it every odd year. And I do appreciate the work that President Bell has helped me with throughout the last couple of terms that she's served. And she has been very helpful, and her background has been a good resource for me to go to on occasion. And she's able to sign those checks and be there when I want to take off. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Nancy.
What do you do?
Councilor McConnell?
I didn't say anything.
Okay, I thought I saw you raise your hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Councilor Fox, welcome.
Hi.
We have just voted in President Bell again for another 2 years. So
All right.
we're at the end of that portion of our agenda. Want to make sure that everybody's aware that I will be doing the State of the City virtually, unfortunately, on January 26th at 6 p.m. Invitations will be going out electronically and on the social media this week. I encourage you to spread the word and let everybody see what I got to say. Sammy, agenda review.
There are no changes noted to the agenda. We do have a little bit of additional information that we will put up on the screen when we get to talking to item number 5.
Number 5. So we'll do a screen share on that one.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Sammy. Citizen testimony.
We have nobody signed up to speak tonight, and we did not receive any written testimony.
Okay, thank you. Council or consent agenda. Councilors may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior to consideration. In other words, if you have any concerns, now is the time to pull one of these out of the consent agenda so we can discuss them. Otherwise, we take them as a package. Are there any statements, concerns, or questions? I know I have one small amendment in the December 8th minutes, the last paragraph. It states, it's discussing the appeal of the subdivision, and they're labeling it as the Whitaker subdivision. I believe it should be Weicker. Isn't that the name of the applicant?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I got
Okay.
the change. Thank you.
You got that, Sammy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Any other comments, questions, amendments? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented with the small adjustment on the December 8th meeting.
Second.
Second.
Councillor Fox with a second. Vote. Let's see, there's a motion by Councillor Bell and a second by Councillor Fox to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And it passes unanimous. Thank you. Item 5, Resolution 2021-01, a resolution applying a construction cost inflation factor to existing system development charges. Megan.
Good evening, councilors. Before you this evening, I have the resolution for the annual inflation factor for the system development charges, or SDCs. This may look familiar to you because it comes in front of council every year. In 2006, council directed SDCs be updated annually using a standard construction index. The city chose to use Engineering News's November construction index rate. For November of 2020, that was a 1.7% increase. This resolution is to update all SDCs for 2021 and will be reflected on all development that occurs in 2021. Attached with this report, you will find the calculations as well as an informational sheet with some FAQs. Please let me know if you have any other questions.
Counselor Lehman.
Just a clarification. So if a house was being built new, it would be the addition of the residence, water, transportation, and wastewater fee, which would total $25,578. Is that how it would be applied?
That's my understanding, yes.
And then the employee is just for when one of our employees is required to work for a property owner?
No, just let me jump in. That is the park SDC, and so it's charged by employee on a commercial property.
That's for parks?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2021-01, a resolution applying an annual construction cost inflation factor to existing system development charges.
Second.
We have a motion by Counselor McConnell and a second by Counselor Lehman to approve Resolution 2021-01, a resolution applying construction cost inflation factor to the existing systems development charges. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
And any opposed? Any abstentions? But just a note to the counselors, even though I see all of the hands, I always give the opportunity for somebody to oppose just in case, because especially in a Zoom meeting, there may be some miscommunication. So even though I see all of you voting yes, I will always ask for an oppose or an abstention in case we had a miscommunication. So this does pass unanimously. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 6, resolution 2021-03, a resolution amending the salary scale and approving retro pay for supervisory staff of the city. Tim.
Okay, I think my video is still off, is it not?
Not yet.
Sammy, do you have me blocked?
Unmute. Nobody's blocked.
Oh, okay. When I push it, it says you cannot
Tim.
start your video because host has stopped it.
Okay, so Tim Gaines, let's. All right, I invited.
Ah, there we go. Sweet. How's that? Everybody see me?
Hello, Tim.
Hey. Good evening, counselors.
Yes.
Hope everybody's doing well tonight. What I have before you tonight is a resolution to amend the salary scale and approve retro pay for the supervisory staff of the city. So just a few historical notes. So I wasn't here, obviously, so I may have to refer to Ann on some of this, but I'll do my best to give you the information in front of us. Obviously, there was fears when COVID hit during the budget process that revenues would come in. We didn't have a clue. We thought they might come in really light because of everything shutting down. So for that reason, the supervisory staff decided during the budget process to forego their 2% cost of living increase and their any step increase that was due to them. It was accepted by council at the adoption of the budget with the idea that we would look at things in January and see how the first 6 months of the year went. Having said that, we're pleasantly surprised to say the first 6 months have went very well. We did budget conservatively, but we have exceeded expectations by 5 to 10% in all our funds. Our property taxes are up above what we budgeted, and I believe up above what we had last year at this time. the cost of this for the 2% COLA is going to be $4,500 approximately. And for the step increases of supervisors that qualify for that, it'd be about $2,500 approximately. So the overall, the overall budget impact would be about $20,000. And that also includes the 2% increase for our city administrator, who typically follows, I know she's contracted, but our city administrator typically follows what the supervisors do as far as COLA goes. This will probably cause us to be in supplemental budget. However, we were going to be there anyway, so it's not actually causing that. It's just, it would have if it was sitting by itself, but we're going to be doing a supplemental budget anyway, due to some of the craziness we had to deal with earlier and how we set up the budget. So I want to make it clear too that the finance department and the city administrator are totally in support of this, but we do need to show you guys the effects of what this will do, not only this year, but in our 5-year forecast. And I think you have all that information in front of you. Is there any questions at this point?
I do. Question, Patty McConnell.
Okay.
I think it's just a matter of semantics, but it says about the 5th paragraph down. In 2021, there was a true concern as to how COVID-19 would affect the city. I'm assuming that what you are meaning was that it didn't, that you were projecting in 2021 there may be some problems, not that this was 2021.
Where's that at? I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that does make sense. But where are you saying that's at?
That's on page 28, 1, 2, 3, 4, about the 5th paragraph down. It's the beginning of the paragraph.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I think what we're trying to say is for budget year 2021.
Okay.
That's how we refer to it. But yeah, I was definitely haven't done any time travel lately, so I believe that would be correct. So. Any other questions? Anne, did you have anything to add to this?
Well, I just, so on the screen is a shared, a document that we prepared that shows the change in the bottom line for this. And so it's important to note, and I wouldn't feel right not sharing this with the council, that when we make a decision on an expense like this, that it compounds. And so we want to make sure that we point that out. And like I said, I'm in support of this. I'm not showing you this because I'm not in support of it. I think that these supervisors have hung in there and more than deserve this. But I think as the fiduciaries of the city, that you do need to see clearly the impact of it. So I did provide this top, the top part is the change. If we were to add the 2% COLA and the step increase back for the supervisors. And then the bottom is the original budget. So over a 5-year period, obviously for the first year it's $18,000. We projected it be about 20. But when I'm inputting numbers, we don't really know because things change throughout the year. So between $18,000 to $20,000 is our projected of what it would change. And over the 5 years, it's a $92,000 change to the budget. So I just wanted counselors to be aware of that and to be clear that when we're changing salaries, you're changing them out for a out not just 5 years. It will continue to compound going out. Now we didn't have a lot of time to. Normally at budget time we will take the time to really look at revenues and expenses and compare them. We're not really in the position yet this year to do, that kind of an analysis. But as far as expense wise goes, this is how it would change the budget. And I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Counselors, I want you to just speak up because I can't see all of you. So try not to walk all over each other, but go ahead. Oh, there we go. Okay, I can see you now. Counselor Lehman. You're muted. Counselor Lehman is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just wanted to note that these are ordinary and customary increases. They're not extraordinary increases. These are increases that are expected and promised.
Okay.
I would like to add also that the raise is well earned. We've gone through so many years of a tight budget and not even able to consider raises prior. In 2013 or so, we finally got some breathing room. But these employees, our department heads, have worked hard to get through and create some great budget efficiencies and stuff that have saved us money in other places. To recognize also that these budget protractions and the compounding, the expectation is that our income will do the same thing. But do recognize that this puts that upward pressure on those utility bills and things that we have to consider. And I think it's very appropriate for Ann to show us that effect, even though to me it's pretty obvious that they deserve the raise. I think it's very commendable of these department heads to forego that raise with the concern of our budget and not knowing where we were going. And their concern was to have that money in other places to help in other employees and keep the services going. So that needs to definitely be recognized by all of these department heads, that they were willing to sacrifice that for the good of all. So I commend them and thank you. Councillor Bell.
So the increase over time, does that include the contributions for PERS and other benefits?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Fox.
I second the commending of holding off on things, and like Councilor Lehman said, this is not an unforeseen thing. This is just part of general practice, which begets my comment that we should never lower utility rates. We should always hold them or unfortunately raise them. But just I had to get that snigler in there.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-03, a resolution amending the 2020-21 salary scale and approving the retro pay of the supervisory staff of the city.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. I'm going to throw some discussion in. I want to make sure that you are aware of how this was worded, that we are also including that because our city administrator typically ties on to the department heads with the raises. So everybody caught that in the resolution wording. Good. Okay. No surprises. There's a motion by Councillor Lehman and a second by Councillor Alexander to approve resolution 2021-03, resolution amending the salary scale and approving retro pay for supervisory staff of the city. All those in favor, please say aye. Or
Aye.
sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you, Tim, for the presentation.
You bet. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, counselors, on
Thanks,
behalf of
Kim.
supervisors. They've definitely earned it.
Absolutely. I know we all agree to that.
I'm
Mhm.
excited for them to get it.
Let's see, item number 7, intergovernmental agreement with City of Harrisburg to provide law enforcement services. Chief Larson.
Hi, everybody. Before you have an action item regarding the intergovernmental agreement with Harrisburg, as you know, last year you approved a pilot program for traffic enforcement, which was up to 25 hours of traffic enforcement. City Administrator and I met with Harrisburg in December. They're pretty pleased with the service that they received and the comments from the citizens. So they would like to continue that contract. They would like to actually expand it to 35 hours a month. And the 35 hours would have 10 hours for city ordinance enforcement. So the action item is requesting you guys give permission to the city administrator and I to continue negotiations with the city on what that looks like. So a couple things changed from last year would be the contract is going to be for 18 months. So it would go all the way through June 30th of 22, which would align with the budget years. So that would make the budget process quite a bit better. Also, the current rate that we have is $51 per hour. The proposed rate would increase up to $64 per hour. So what we're negotiating is just kind of what it looks like for the city ordinance enforcement. And then I'll entertain any questions. Mark?
Are we offering them overtime at all or no? Or that's the amount of hours they get, that's it?
They can ask for more time. They can ask for more time for court bailiff duties. And if they have some kind of a special event or something that they need coverage for, and that's all subject to our availability.
Okay, so Cobra goes first.
Correct.
So is that rate staying at $64 an hour when it goes to overtime?
What do you mean, overtime for the police officer?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I don't remember having that discussion about overtime. Because it's limited to 35 hours per month. And so really my scheduling would be not to have overtime for Coburg police officers.
Okay.
Larry,
Yes,
that rate includes the wear and tear on the vehicle and the mileage stuff?
I believe we've got that included for all of the costs associated.
I have another question. Oh, go ahead. Quick question. As far as, and I know that there's a little bit in here, but as far as liability goes, being that we are lending or basically making a contract to let our policemen work in Harrisburg, if there is a liability issue in Harrisburg, how is that handled?
It's the same as any liability exposure we have now.
Okay.
So it doesn't increase just because we're in Linton County.
Okay. Okay.
Counselor Lehman. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
The $64 versus the $51, that is a 25% increase. Is that because the $51 did not really reflect what our costs were? Or is there another factor that jumped it to $64?
Well, most of the program is going to be ran by reserve police officers. So reserve police officers are volunteers, as you know. And then what happens is it's kind of ever flowing is that they get hired somewhere else. So one of our solo reserve police officers got hired with OSP, just graduated the OSP Academy. We hired one of our other reserve police officers. So it kind of ebbs and flows with who I have solo to cover that. So if I need to use full-time employees, I want to make sure that the Coburg gets reimbursed for the appropriate amount of money. So the preference is to have solar reserves. And I have 4 new guys that graduated probably a year and a half ago that are working towards that, but they're not there now.
Doesn't that also mention that it's you spending a lot more time monitoring the program over there?
Well,
part of that?
There is some administrative time. I appear at their a couple of city council meetings. You know, I got to do reports for them like I do for you guys. I do a quarterly report to track all the citations. So there's a little bit of management.
Okay.
Counselor McConnell.
So I have a concern about the time the officer is spent in Harrisburg, given that we have had quite a few citizen inquiries as to why we don't have more police coverage in Coburg. How does that impact us in Coburg, and how do we mitigate that?
The only time I have somebody scheduled in Coburg is when I have somebody on duty when I scheduled somebody in Harrisburg, I've got another officer on duty in Coburg. So it's not taking them away from Coburg to Harrisburg. It's when I have double coverage is how I try to schedule probably 90% of that time.
Counselor Lehman.
I will share that I had 2 citizens talk to me last year when we approved this, and their concern was something what Patty was just saying, is that we're using Coburg police officers in Harrisburg where they felt we didn't have enough coverage currently in Coburg. And my response to them, which satisfied their concern, was that almost exclusively it was going to be reserve officers. So it was a win-win both financially for our city, because the $51 an hour was coming directly into the city, yet there was not an expenditure for those officers' hours from the city. That dynamic is changing now, and I'm not sure that I would support that.
So that was the original plan. That's still the plan. It's just when we have a contract and I have to produce those hours or cover those hours, I had to use full-time employees. And that is a revenue. This year, it would be $26,000 of revenue that the police department normally doesn't get because we're not about revenue. But that would be a contract revenue source that the police department could provide.
Counselor Blaine.
Does that give you an opportunity to keep maybe another officer part-time or full-time in the system working in Coburg and then moving to Harrisburg?
Well, Harrisburg has talked to me in the past about possibly expanding that to 1 full-time police officer. And this is, last year was a pilot program. Right. So I think they're new. I'm not sure they've identified exactly what they want or what that would look like, but that's kind of the direction that it was going. Was that possibility to maybe benefit both cities? So the goal isn't to take anybody away from Coburg. And I know when we first put this in the newspaper or the newsletter that we were doing this, there was quite a few comments, and it was a lot of people that were outside of Coburg and a lot of people actually in between here in Coburg because they were afraid they were going to get caught speeding. So I'm very familiar with a lot of those comments when we first initiated this whole program. After that, it died down, and basically I didn't get any comments about Harrisburg other than positive comments from Harrisburg citizens. So that's been my contact as far as experience with the pilot program.
Okay. Counselor Fox.
After all is said and done, is there any profit gravy, so to speak, to allow for extra stuff here in Coburg or other things?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, at the $64 an hour, does that just cover costs of the administration and the cars and the officers' time, and therefore it's a neutral budget?
If it's reserve police officers, that would all be, I guess you could say profit. It would be above the cost other than the maintenance of the cars.
Right.
If it's a full-time employee, and I'm going to need a little bit of help on that.
I know part of the discussion that we had when we were setting this up, and Ann can get into the details more, but when we set this up, we wanted an analysis of what it would cost us. And we did it with the assumption that a paid officer would be there all the time. And that's where that $51, and that was all the overhead for the police operation and the staff member. And now what we're seeing is there's a little more administrative. And so that's why the bump in that. So go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, what we did is, so when it was in a pilot, we assumed it was reserve officers the majority of the time. Chief does have responsibility to report, so it is taking some of his time, and occasionally he's going to be sending a paid officer up there. So when we were looking at salaries, we have a chargeable rate scale that we use. It includes all the costs of employing that employee. And what we did is take the chargeable rate scale from the reserve officer all the way down to the chief. We added them all together and then divided them by the amount of officers to come up with a medium range scale, and that's where the $64, why it was raised to $64 is because we were adding a little bit more in to cover more of the chief's time, and if he had to send a paid officer up, that we were bumping it up to make sure that we were covering for that. So that's where we came to the 64.
And so this year, so the citations, there really hasn't been a drop in citation activity for Coburg since we've been doing Harrisburg. The number's about the same. I think the court revenue is above where it was last year or where it's projected to be. The activity level is about the same. There was a little bit of a drop due to more to COVID than anything else. Because when COVID hit, we were told by the Chiefs Association and the Sheriff's Association to basically limit activity, to limit exposure for COVID-19. And then even as of today's date, we don't write tickets. We can't write tickets for expired tags, for anything with DMV related violations. So I think that's had more of an impact on citation levels than anything else. But from everything that I've seen, activity did not drop, because I knew we would have this conversation, but activity did not drop in Coburg with people being in Harrisburg.
Councilor Lehman.
So under this contract previously, we were at 20 hours per week and
25 per month.
25 per month.
It's only per month, yeah.
And
So it's not it's not a whole lot of time. And I schedule them normally in about 2-hour increments, so they can get up there and feel for where the traffic issues are. And it's not pulling them away from, the Coburg for a long period of time. So that's been pretty palatable and I have 4 that are in training that are moving that direction. So that one's, again, it kind of ebb and flows. So the sooner, as soon as I can get them solo, that's the plan.
So can you put it in a percentage? How much of the time will be reserved versus full-time for this 18-month contract?
Right now, it's about 50%.
And the officers that spend that 50% of the time doesn't decrease the overall number of hours within Coburg by the full-time officers?
Yes. That's a direct relationship.
So it will decrease.
Correct. And that's where I told you that I never, or try to never, schedule an officer up there and pull coverage from Coburg. So if I have 2 officers on Coburg, that's when I have one of them go to Harrisburg for 2 hours.
So we still have coverage, but it'd just be less.
Correct. That's correct.
Councilor McConnell.
Is there a possibility of adding an officer in Coburg with the the money that the amount of money that you're expecting to receive in this coming year?
That was
In
what was
excess of
buried
what
in my
you-
question.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's break even.
Well, it would be profit for the time that the reserve officers are doing Harrisburg.
But
And
it
you're gonna
wouldn't
have that
be-
expense for the officers' wages, whether they're in Harrisburg or not. So that gives the police department the opportunity to bring in revenue. And it was a pilot program last year. Harrisburg is happy on their end. And really, I haven't received any comments from citizens since the initial blast. When we put it out there, that's what we were doing.
But we have received lots of comments from citizens saying they don't feel like there's enough coverage in
Yeah, but
Coburg.
that's a bigger issue because, so we've looked at, because I know that Coburg Community Page has a lot of stuff on it. And I know that we had 3 cars broken into, and we've looked at that, and the time frame is just hard. We don't have a definite time frame. We figure, well, some of them that we've had have been on the graveyard shift. So I've got officers working till midnight, till 2 a.m. We don't have anybody to cover after that as far as police coverage. So when you say that, there's a police officer on duty here the majority of the time, but we don't have anybody, and you wouldn't have anybody for graveyard coverage unless you get, I think it's 4.5 employees minimum, and that's without covering vacation time, holiday time, sick time, and that's all the stuff that we talked about at the budget when we approved the officer last year.
So
But this is a direction towards, the police department doesn't have any revenue, but this would be a source of revenue for the police department if you're looking at it as a contract service.
And
I
what
would
I'm
like to-
asking,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What I'm asking though is that can this revenue be put towards additional staff on the police force? Is what I'm asking.
I'm going to say no. So when you consider hiring a staff member, the load on that salary is 34%. And that's over and above the salary that is paid to the employee. So this simply does not earn enough to hire a police officer. Can it start leading us in a direction where we might be able to split a police officer with Harrisburg? I think that has been the future intention of both Harrisburg and Coburg, possibly is that we start working towards that way where we might have a shared officer and Coburg's able to have 4.5 officers or, another half of an officer on behalf of Coburg. But with what we're collecting in this contract, that is not enough to hire an employee.
So one of the things I want you to recognize is we got the $51 an hour, and that was whether a reserve officer unpaid or a paid officer was there. So even when a paid officer is there, we're being paid for that officer to be there. It is revenue. It goes into the general fund. And one of the discussions we had with Harrisburg was, as Ann said, was, down the road, and we've had that discussion ourselves, is down the road that revenue would help us. And it certainly would be able to give us a little more breathing room to hire another person, because you don't hire part-time police officers. They're reserve officers. When we hire somebody, it's going to be a full-time police officer. And if we're making enough money to pay for half of that, and Harrisburg is paying enough money to pay for half of that, then we could bring on a full-time officer. So it does make that threshold a little closer for us. And that is part of one of the discussions that we had. Whether or not we go there or not, we'll see. But we are making revenue for those police officers. We're not paying for it necessarily. It is the concern, as we've mentioned, like Councilor McConnell, is the coverage issue. But I think down the road, it will actually help our coverage issues. Counselor Blaine.
I mean, I think we need to kind of remember that we're a very small community that has our own police force, and a lot of communities our size can't manage that. And so there's going to be limitations to what we can provide as a city. Obviously, all of us that live here in Coburg would love 100% coverage all the time, but we're just stretched too thin. We don't have the budget, as Chief Larson said, is we're a kind of a break-even police force. And so anything we can do to keep people employed, whether that be a reserve through Harrisburg or somebody splitting time, I think that's a benefit for our community with the lack of resources we have to employ a full-time, decent-sized police force.
Counselor Alexander.
I agree with that. And I go along with that and also say that because of our location as a city, because of who we have as a sheriff, and because of where we stand financially, I could really see a way, I'd like to find a way that the city can create more revenue for the police department. And I think we can. There's got to be programs, there's got to be training programs, things like that that we can actually here. Again, due to us being right off the 5 freeway, being centrally located to everything, maybe having other cities come and get instruction or work with programs that we can come up with to create more revenue. I would like to see us create more revenue. It's not going to come out of the air, but I think our city deserves to have them more often here. And I think the demographic of this city is changing also and is going to demand that. So I think as a city, it'd be nice if we could find a way to create more revenue. That's all I have to say.
Counselor Fox.
I think this would be an agenda for our planning session for a more in-depth discussion because I think those are all valid points. I think the economy right now is driving more issues of people from 2 to 5 in the morning looking through people's cars, and we're seeing those reports, and we are off the I-5 corridor by an inch. And so, and people come for gas and all of a sudden start patrolling the town. There are many factors there, and I think this probably isn't the venue to do it in, and the planning session would be better for an in-depth discussion about policing.
And just to talk about just what John said, just to follow up. So today we have a bicycle that we've found about 2 months ago. We ran it, it wasn't stolen. We were looking at converting it to police department use for bicycle patrol for a lot of our events. We ran it again today. It's stolen out of Bend, Oregon from a burglary. So you get tremendous input from, and the guy who's being charged for being taken to grand jury tomorrow for burglaries, and he wasn't even associated with Coburg. I have no idea how he got here from doing a burglary in Bend to come into Coburg. So that is a top big plus. You got to realize we just decriminalized small user amounts of meth and heroin. So that's going to have an impact on our city as well. So revenue sources to get any additional help, I think it's something that we should talk about. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
I think one of the things I'd like to share with everybody is obviously I've done when I was police liaison with the chief as a counselor, and since being mayor and talking with other mayors and communities. We have a police force, and I don't have the numbers for this year, but I know 3 years ago, comparing ourselves to Cresswell, which is, I believe, about 3 times larger, 2.5, 3 times larger than Coburg. And they have a law enforcement contract with the sheriff's office. And at that time, they had 3 deputies. This was, again, I believe 3 years ago. And their law enforcement budget for the city was $680,000. At that time, our law enforcement budget for 3 paid officers that we owned, we didn't contract, that worked for us, was $100,000 less. And I think that's something that we need to recognize in our policing that we have in our city, and also attribute a lot of that to Chief Larson's administration of the department and working with our officers and having a strong reserve corps. And I'm pretty sure I was looking at some numbers last year, and I think we're still getting a much better bargain than Cresswell with the contract service. Now,
We are.
obviously, the money that comes in from the Harrisburg contract or any other is something that does help the city be in a better place to move forward with more law enforcement or resources. Given that, it sounds like the council wants to have more discussion about where we're going with policing. But we also need to look at the issue that's before us, and do we want to move forward with that?
I mean,
And
I'm happy to make,
I will say that it is going to be put on the list of future agenda items, maybe a work session or something. So yes, we will do it, but we need to address the issue before us. Councillor Alexander.
Councilor Blaine, I don't know if you were going to say this, but I move to approve the city administrator. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
The chief of police to negotiate and sign the renewal of the intergovernmental agreement with the city of Harrisburg to provide law enforcement services.
second,
We have a motion by Councillor Alexander and a second by Councillor Blaine to approve the IGA with the city of Harrisburg to provide law enforcement services. All those in favor, please wave your hand in front of the camera. We have 1, 2, 3. Please do it again. All those in favor, please wave your hand in front of the camera. 1, 2, 3. All those opposed?
I think Councillor Fox got frozen. He didn't move.
No. Sammy, do you have contact with Councillor Fox for a
I
vote?
do. Just a moment here.
There he goes. Oops.
I thought he was just being super still.
There he is.
John, are you voting for? It's in a parking lot.
Councillor Fox.
No sound.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yeah, I sent a text to Sammy. I'm having technical difficulties, but I vote in favor
Thank you.
for the fourth time.
So again, all councilors in favor, please put your hand up in front of the camera. Okay, all those opposed? Any abstentions? The vote is 4-2. It passes. Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief Larson.
A comment? Comment, Mayor?
Councilor Lehman, yes.
Usually when you have dissenting votes, you ask for,
I'm getting ready to, but I'm still writing my notes down. I'm sorry. Hang on just a second. I was writing your names down so I could ask you to put that in and then record it. Councilor Lehman.
I wholeheartedly supported this agreement last year, and primarily because it was used mostly our reserve officers. I do have a concern, and I've heard that concern from the community at least twice, that they thought that it would be taking our full-time officers from time in the city. I understand the chief indicating that we always will have one officer when there's a second officer deployed to Harrisburg, but that does take us down from 2 to 1 in the city at that time. And it does decrease the overall hours throughout the month of coverage. And the concern is that we need more coverage, not less coverage. I don't see this as really being a cost factor or a revenue factor for the city. We're only talking at $26,000 at 37 hours per month. at $64 an hour. But the principle is that it is decreasing the amount of police services. I wholeheartedly support anything that will increase the revenues to the city for increased police services and increased officer time. I don't see, as you stated, that this is a step toward that goal.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Lehman. Councilor McConnell?
I concur with Councilor Lehman, and I want to make sure that I state that I am in full support of our police force and what they're doing here in Coburg, but I can't in good conscience vote for something that I know we have so many citizens questioning the amount of coverage we have right now. So I just feel like I need to state that.
Thank you, councilors, for stating your concerns. Is there any other councilors that want to make a comment before we move on to the next item? Councilor Bell.
The only thing, I do know that will be money coming in, and I recognize that would not be, we could put it towards another police officer. There have been some comments about developing neighborhood watches. Has that come to city administrator or the mayor or our police department? I mean, that might help that 2 to 5 o'clock time where that seems to be when the issues are arising.
I haven't heard anything. I've heard that there's been discussion about it, but I haven't been approached.
I have not been approached at all about anyone wanting to start Neighborhood Watch.
I will say personally that it's probably been 3 to 5 years, but I've heard neighbors mention that, and also kind of a back-to-back or a parallel with the Citizens Emergency Response Team kind of concept, where you would have a neighborhood leader that would help coordinate emergencies in the neighborhoods, but also help coordinate a neighborhood watch. Councilor Blaine, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Chief Larson that if say we ended up not doing this with Harrisburg, would that give us any more time in Coburg with multiple officers, and would that fill the gap in that dark space in the middle of the night that you mentioned where some of that crime happens?
It would not.
I just wanted to clarify, because it just seems like regardless, we're not necessarily gaining anything by not having somebody go to Harrisburg. And as long as that I'm understood there, then I'm okay with where we're at. But I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Councilor Fox.
So I just, I was on the fence on this because it was supposed to use reserve officers. And I did hear Chief Larson say that, he tries to do that, but because we have a contract, sometimes an officer from Coburg goes up to Harrisburg when they could be in Coburg. So that was a concern. And the other concern I had, and since the contract was already presented and shared with everyone, I felt that even though it went from 51 to 64, we did the average of all things rather than 2/3 of the high end. Nonprofits and governments tend to, not look at the, how to make a win out of it. And you don't want to squeeze someone, but it seems like there's an average cost as opposed to 2/3 of the average, so that there's a net benefit for Coburg. So those are some of my concerns. I did vote for it, but I was sitting on the fence.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Alexander?
Is there a way that, I know they're part of the general fund, but is there a way that we can reroute the money that we're making from Harrisburg to go directly to the police department, or their overtime or anything else, or at least to accumulate?
Well, part of it is reimbursing. I mean, if it's officers that are spending time there, that's part of their scheduled workday.
Right.
So that has to continue to go to support those officer salaries.
But I'm talking about the 50% that we average, 50% that we're using reserve. Only.
Right. But the revenue would go into the police. It is recorded into the police fund or into the police department as revenue, and then it becomes part of the police budget. And so it is being recorded into the police department and into the police budget. So I think that what we would have to talk about, and again, last year was a pilot program. We were just trying to see if it worked, if this was something that both cities wanted to move forward with. What we would have to talk about is anything over and above, and this requires a really good record of who's up there on every single shift. Of if there are funds that over and above what paid officers that were designated reserve officer hours, then those funds would go to the reserve officer program. And so those would go for training, for equipment, for other things that the whole department benefits from. And I'm assuming that Chief Larson would agree with me on that we would as we move forward, track the hours a little bit closer this year so that we know who's up there and how much of that percentage. And so that's a good time to start tracking that very closely.
Yeah, I would like to strengthen our department for the extra work they're having to do.
Councillor Fox.
Am I to understand in the pilot year, we didn't track the hours closely so we know what the net positive or negative is for the pilot program?
We
No,
did.
I know
The hours were tracked.
the hours were tracked.
Okay, and did we do a cost benefit analysis?
No.
I don't believe we've done one as of yet, no.
We just completed the year. So we're just finishing up the year. So that will come.
Yeah, the contract was till the end of December. So it just started the negotiations. I have the schedules for everybody that worked up there, their hours. You got to understand the reserve program, there's costs associated with that. They're just not, there's a ton of training that go into a reserve police officer. The hiring is the same as a full-time police officer. It probably costs me $1,000 to hire them because I have to have a psychological exam, have to have a medical exam. I got a bill today for almost $400 for a medical exam for the new police officer that we hired from the reserve program. So there's definitely costs associated with having these reserves. The benefit to the city is you get more police officers. So we have 15 people total for the police department. 11 of those are reserve police officers. So they're just a huge benefit. And so if I can try to increase revenue for them to offset some of those expenses, I mean, that was really my desire for the program, was to just help with costs for the police department. So it's expensive to have a police department. It's just employees. I think the psychological exam is like $500 just for that alone. And then you have, uniforms and different things that are associated with reserve officers, which it's good that we're hiring and training reserve officers that get picked up somewhere full time. That's what I want, but I would like to keep them. But I mean, that's just a cost associated with running a police department. So I was just trying to find a way to try to offset some of those costs. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I know that Harrisburg is really happy. I agree with Patty. We've had complaints about car break-ins. I haven't had any complaints about traffic. And it's easy that the community page is, if there was somebody going to complain, it would be on there. So I don't respond to anything but I do pay attention to what's on there.
At this time, counselors, I want to remind you that we have placed this on a future agenda list, and we probably need to move on because I know we could talk about this all night long. So I'm gonna cut it short on this subject. I'm sorry, but I do invite the counselors to make note of your issues and concerns, and please feel free to share them with Ann so that we can set up priority list for our future meetings and what we want to deal with. Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 8, the zoning code review ad hoc committee appointments. Megan.
You're muted, Megan.
Thank you. Hi, sorry for that. I have before you the appointments for the Zoning Code Review Ad Hoc Committee. In November, City Council held a work session to discuss the findings of the build-out scenario. And from that meeting, staff was given direction to create an advisory committee. In December, the City Council approved the formation of that committee to look at zoning code topics that came up as part of the build-up scenario project, and also to look at other issues in our development code and help strengthen some of the things that we've seen come up lately. The mayor has invited the folks that are listed on this memo, and all of them have accepted. They represent 2 city councilors, 2 planning commissioners, 1 local business owner, and 2 citizens at large. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Questions? I'll state that I'm very happy with the makeup of this committee. First of all, most of them are very experienced with this, so that gets them running right away. They're on the ground and running on this. And also just the knowledge that's available throughout these members of this committee. I couldn't have picked a better crew. It just is exciting to see that these people are going to take this on, because it is a pretty onerous task, but they're all very capable, and I'm really looking forward to seeing their work. Well, given that, I would recommend I would entertain a motion.
I move to recommend Mayor Smith appoint councilors Patty McConnell and John Fox, Planning Commissioner Marissa Doyle, Planning Commissioner Chair Paul Thompson, local business owner Alan Wells, citizens at large Kathy Ingebretson, and Jerry Bainey to the Zoning Code Review Ad Hoc Committee.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Alexander. I have a motion by Councilor Bell and a second by Councilor Alexander to appoint the ad hoc committee members as put forth before the council. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand in the camera.
Can I vote?
Oh, please do. There's other members. You can vote for them.
Okay.
I don't see Councilor Fox.
Here he is. The picture with the Christmas tree.
Yeah, I don't see him though.
Oh, he's a
I don't even know
hologram.
his vote.
He's smiling. Does that count?
If you can unmute and talk, John.
There.
I vote yes.
He votes yes. Okay, it is unanimous. Thank you, John.
Can I say something?
And with that, I will make the appointments of I hereby, as mayor, appoint Councilors Patty McConnell and John Fox, Planning Commissioner Marissa Doyle, Planning Commission Chair Paul Thompson, local business owner Alan Wells, and citizens at large Kathy Ingebrigtsen and Jerry Bainey to the Zoning Code Review Ad Hoc Committee. I would also at this time remind you that we made a committee appointment similar, which is just essentially the renewal of the Parks and Tree Committee members. And so as mayor, I appoint Karen Corey, Tom Beatty, Colleen Marshall, Lana Meston, Joe Morneau, Mary Mosier, and Claire Smith as the 7 voting members of the Park Tree Citizens Advisory Committee for the calendar year 2021. So those are 2 committee appointments. And thank you, Megan, for your part. And thank you, councilors. City administration report, Ann.
So I will cover a few topics and then I'm happy to answer questions, as are the supervisors that are present regarding anything in the report. I'm going to start with COVID-19. We continue to operate under the same guidelines. City Hall remains closed. We do have a few more staff member working in the building at this time. Everybody has their own offices. And pretty much we're staying to our corners. Masks are required. We're staying out of the shared in City Hall. Hello?
Sorry.
Oh. The police department was offered vaccines and they were able to take advantage of that last week. We had hoped that at least our public works team, we initially got word that our public works team would be included in that. That did not pan out. And so I did ask Jim Bell to reach out to the county to ask when essential workers would be included. And we didn't really get a clear answer on that. So we're waiting to hear. That hasn't been identified and it hasn't been clear so far. I did have an announcement come across my desk from the governor's office just right at the end of the day that said that the governor was moving vaccines available to people that are 65 and over. And so what that's going to look like, I don't know how that's going to be distributed. But that is something that is has now been declared by the governor. Lane County is going to be remaining in the extreme list. So we will continue with the City Hall being closed, as well as Zoom meetings until we're not on the extreme list any longer. So staff have all completed all of their required trainings through OSHA. And we're just trying to stay healthy, keep practicing. We're doing a very good job of it. We staff are healthy for the most part. I'm not saying nobody's ever sick, but for the most part, the staff has remained healthy throughout this. So we're really trying very hard to keep it that way. Do I have any questions regarding COVID? Okay. The water project update, we're finished the I-5 and we're just in the middle of just doing a lot of design work. We're working with the Water Authority to move the water rights from 2 abandoned wells. If you remember, we approved a contract to abandon 2 wells, and we're moving the water rights to the new well property. And so all of those things are happening. We did have a meeting with all of the property owners and some who were not property owners of easements going up the hill on Diamond Hill to our reservoir. And that was a really nice meeting in which we were able to answer their questions. They had a lot of them. And so we did answer their questions and try to solve some of the issues. And they gave us really good information for our engineer to consider in that meeting. Mayor?
How many people attended that meeting? Just
I
a rough.
believe there was 5 to 7 property owners there at that meeting. Yeah. And mainly what they wanted to share was any kind of things that might be in our pathway, and some concerns that they have with the easement being on their properties. So we'll continue to work with them. The engineer will be back in touch with them early in this new year, as we move forward with our design plans. Johnny Diamond Park, we're still working on the parking spot with the contractor. That has been an ongoing. We do have an actual licensed inspector who has declared the parking spot not in compliance. It has to be repaired, fixed, moved to a different place. So Brian and the engineer are working on a plan for that. Main Streets is moving forward. It over the holidays, it just kind of got stalled. Megan is moving into the role of the Main Streets coordinator. And so we'll be hearing more about that from her as we move forward. The planning position, I am posting the position on Friday. It'll be out for a month, and we hope to have a planner interview process happening in March, and somebody hired by late spring. Just a reminder that the council retreat is on February 6th, not January 6th, as it says in my report. I apologize for that. And the tentative time is from 9 to 3. So I hope that you all get that on your calendar. We're trying to get a binder delivered to the council with a substantial amount of time for you to review it. And so we'll do our very best on that. Councilor Blaine?
I just have like a random thought, like on our all future events, is there any way to just send like a calendar invite so we can automatically like RSVP in our calendar? Or is that like with the email, with the Zoom link and all that stuff?
We can do a meeting invite, just a standard meeting invite for those who have an Outlook calendar.
Oh, okay.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, just something like that. So like if somebody sent it next week and it's like for February 6th, we just have an automatic update where we just click, yes, we're coming, and it adds to our calendar if that's possible.
Yeah.
Already got that.
Pardon me?
I think I already received that.
Yeah.
You did? Okay. Yeah,
The Zoom invite, Kyle, I think I know what you're asking for, and I do think that it's something that I could put the Outlook tab on, as most people are using those.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. I second that motion.
I third and fourth it, but I'd like to have a little more notice than like a day before or 2 days before. If we could get some advance notice on it, so it's on our calendar, like at least a week.
Agreed.
And so you guys have been getting your packet materials a week in advance.
Right, which is great.
The Zoom meetings, and that's for safety. So the Zoom invite doesn't get out to people. So they recommend that we don't put it out until the day of, so it doesn't get forwarded and forwarded and forwarded, so you can control who is registered in your meetings. We haven't really had any problems, but I know that there have been a lot of people that have. So if you want the Zoom invites sooner.
Not the Zoom, just a calendar.
What I'm hearing Councilor Blaine say is just a meeting invite that goes out to our calendar. So
yeah,
like, I didn't update my calendar for some reason, and tonight's meeting wasn't in there.
So would you like a 12-month in advance, like, the city council when we do the 12-month calendar to just put the Outlook invites?
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
No, we'll be full tomorrow.
And we could probably do work sessions as well when we know when they're scheduled. Send out a look invite for those as well. And
That would be
especially
great.
like the
Yeah.
retreat. We'll
Awesome.
work together and make sure that happens.
Cool. All right, appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Transportation plan update. So I did meet with regional partners from the Lane County and Jake Callister from LCOG, and we talked about moving forward with the Coburg transportation plan. And so we're working at a work plan for that, and hopefully the council will see. My hope is within a month, no more than 6 weeks, we would have an example of the changes that need to be made in the transportation plan to move it forward. Highlighted areas so that we're well aware of what we need to work on. And then we would move forward to do that. We probably aren't going to form a committee for that. It would be more of, I think, a good work session for the council and the planning commission together to review the changes that need to be made and then say, yes, move it forward. So I'm hoping that we will be seeing that over the next at least couple months so we can start moving it forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions or any of the supervisors that are here can answer questions as well.
Councilor
Okay.
Alexander.
Yeah, the east-west connector, is that Pearl?
The East-West Connector is a road that is on the transportation plan for both Coburg and Lane County that is meant to be a freight route that is north of Coburg. And it doesn't exist right now. It's in the future plans. And we had it on our transportation plan as just a holding point that we knew the road needed to be there. So that's one of the pieces that we need to update is where will that be placed and who will be responsible for getting it done. It's kind of recommended that we remove it as part of the Coburg plan and reference it to the Lane County plan.
Okay.
To go a little deeper into that, we drew it into our urban growth boundary line at the northern end of it because we recognized that there needed to be some kind of an east-west connector, basically to bypass downtown with heavy truck traffic and commercial traffic.
Yeah.
Part of the remand from the urban growth boundary was that specific thing in our transportation plan, and it said, and they told us because it was so tied into our transportation plan, they remanded the transportation plan back to us also.
Got it. Yeah, I wondered where that went. Okay.
So question, if we pull it out of our plan, will it just disappear though?
It's
No.
already in the Lane County plan. We asked them to get
Okay.
that in there. So it's a reference item in their plan.
Okay, thank you.
And we will leave it in our plan, but it will be a reference item. So
Okay.
we'll refer to it as an important thing that needs to take place.
That's been sitting in there an awful long time.
Yeah. So what we discussed was that perhaps, so because the MPC or the MPO goes out further than Coburg, goes out to the county line, that the funding that we receive, federal funding for roads, is included in that area. And so what the representative of the county and I discussed was perhaps that we can go together in a partnership to seek funding for at least the design of that road and the feasibility study for the road so that we can get the project started. So hopefully that will come out of after we update our transportation plan, then we can start looking at partnering to seek funding to start the project moving forward.
And I'd like to add real quick the MPO where ODOT was stating that they're moving forward on the engineering phase of the IAMP, which is the interchange on the east side of the freeway. So a year and a half, 2 years ago, they announced that they had funding and were doing that, but they actually announced in the MPO that they are making contacts and looking at actual, I'll say driving survey stakes, but not necessarily, ready to do anything else to really lay out the design of accesses to those properties on the east side of it. So that was kind of good news. Coburg is kind of bubbling up to the top in the transportation, regional transportation planning.
And I did, I'm on an email that goes all around, and I did see this week that they're hoping to get before the city council, Coburg City Council, in the next several months when they do have that initial design done, to have you review it in a council meeting. So they'll be seeking an opportunity to present it to you. Is there any questions, any public works or any other questions that you might have?
So,
Councilor Blaine.
I was just curious if we're still, semi on track for some of the future street upgrades that we had planned, or are we kind of just on pause for a little while?
Well, the TUF and all of that discussion was brought up, and we agreed to take that on in the spring. And I believe right now I'm trying to schedule that in the March meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Councilor Bell, was that your concern?
No, I had a question, a comment. I've noticed a lot of signs. I've noticed several signs around the park that notifies drivers that that's a children playing area. And I want to say thank you. I don't think they've been there before. At least I hadn't noticed them. And then have we put up permanent speed signs at both the north and south end of town? I've seen those recently. They look like they're permanent. The digital that records
That's the rotating county signs that go around the county. I'm pretty sure, unless Ann's gotten other news, but the county brings those in as part of the county road, Pearl and Willamette Streets. And so you see them come, then you see them disappear. That's because they're going to somewhere else in the county. So the county has a rotation for those signs that they bring them around. And the discussion in the MPO and Lane Act actually was that's a lot more effective than leaving them there all the time, because then they fade into they disappear. And so this rotation thing is what they're going with, and it seems to be being received well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just had one other item that I wanted to just put in your mind, and that is that we did send a letter out to the surrounding neighborhood of the property that is seeking annexation. And that included all of the property owners on Diamond Hill. We are getting a lot of feedback. We're getting a lot of contact back from those property owners, a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. And our hope was to give them plenty of time to know that this was coming to the city council and give them a chance to answer their questions. We are also offering them a Zoom meeting. We haven't set it up yet for any property owners who want to participate with our planner. Just time to ask questions. It seems to be well received when we offer a neighborhood a chance to just have a question and answer time. So we will be setting that up. We have one neighborhood, one property owner up there who has kind of taken the lead in trying to set up a time for the neighbors to ask their questions. But I want the council to have a heads up that those letters have went out, they have been received, and I'm fielding a lot of phone calls from those property owners.
Councillor Lehman.
Any more discussion on the planning director position?
That position will be posted this Friday, and the interview process, it will be out for a month. And it will be, interview process is probably taking place in March sometime. And hopeful hire in the end of March, April, early April.
I guess I must have missed the conversation about that. I thought we were still working in a contract with temporary services for that, but decision was made to go forward with hiring the position.
The contract ends at the end of this fiscal year. We could renew it. If we don't find someone, we can renew that contract. It's actually more expensive for us to have a contract planner than it is to hire a planner. I think the intent was for us to take a break and kind of try to decide what it is that we needed as a planner. I've had a lot of conversations with planning commission members and citizens as to what their opinion was that we needed. The general consensus was that we need a planner who is a mid-career planner. We don't need a high-end planner. We can always call on LCOG. They have many planners that we can call on for different specialties. But we need a planner who has some experience, who has land use, who is familiar with the laws and has had some time in a rural community and been part of some good planning projects. And so we're looking at 5 years, possibly 5 years of experience as a rural planner.
Any other questions for Ann or department heads? I remind you,
Yeah.
we've got Brian and Chief and everybody on. Councillor Alexander.
Could you explain a little more on the Planning Commission work session? That last
Yeah.
part.
So there was in our historical district, there's a lot of very small lots. Those homes are, it's very hard for them to do any kind of extensions onto their homes due to the setbacks. And so we've seen a couple applications for setback variances, and there was a concern that we were going to see more. And so we had this conversation about whether or not the Planning Commission wanted to tackle a development code change or consideration for changing the side yard setbacks on this historical home district. So they did discuss it, and they decided that since the development, since we were putting together an ad hoc committee to look at development code changes, that they felt they wanted to push that discussion to that. They did not want to tackle it themselves.
I think that's a great plan.
What is
Thanks.
the side yard setback right now?
The side yard setback right now is, Gary, are you here? I have just a second.
5 feet.
5 feet.
5
I'm
feet.
pretty sure it's 5 feet.
5 feet. So that doesn't allow, I mean, it's pretty hard to do any kind of a remodel and add footage to a home if your home is on a very small lot. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Harmon. Brian, I noticed under treatment plant violations with the chlorine residual. how big a deal was that? And is it a concern that we need to deal with beyond what you're doing?
Not at this time. I think we just got a letter from from the DEQ. They have sent it up for a larger look at enforcement. There's some practices that we need to change, some procedures at the plant to eliminate the violations that we were having. I think we've addressed those internally. And when it comes down to the DEQ enforcement, usually what happens when it goes to the higher ups at DEQ, we can sit down and do some sort of mitigation and talk through it. I don't think there's going to be any monetary enforcement. I think it's going to be something along the lines of we need to do a better job at this.
So basically just straighten up our procedural, our process.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So there
thank
was
you, Brian.
just a couple times where during the chlorine maintenance cleans, the chlorine residual exceeded what the dechlorination system could take. And it typically happens during the high flows. So our chlorine limit is 0.1 milligrams per liter, and our violation was 0.17 milligrams per liter. So it's not like we were polluting at a high rate, but we did exceed our limit.
Okay.
Question, did you self-notify or did someone else notify?
No,
Or didn't you?
that's a great question. We always self-notify.
That's great. Kudos.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions for department heads or Ann?
I just have a quick question.
Mr.
I just
Lehman?
heard that there's an alley in town that is going to be requested to be abandoned, and just wanted to know what the process for that is, and that come to city council for a decision, or is that made at department level?
That is a good question that I don't know the answer to.
I know it used to be that it went before the council, but that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I will have to find that out, Councilor Raymond. I don't know who that would come before.
And then my understanding is that once the alley is abandoned, the adjacent properties share the difference of that alley towards their property.
Yeah,
side.
we'll have to find it. My recollection is that the abandonments came before city council. That is my recollection. So, but I will check into that and get you an answer.
I also understand a physical structure built in the middle of the alley too. It's being used by the property owner.
Those would all have to be issues addressed at that time.
Gary, our city attorney, is on the line, so he can answer.
If that alley is dedicated to the public, it has to be vacated, which does have to come to the council.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say there's a number of alleys like that in Coburg. Doesn't necessarily have a structure in it, but it wouldn't be passable.
Well, and if it's vacated or, taken away, don't those property owners have to then purchase that property from the city? It's not just gifted to them, is it?
That was a follow-up question. Yes.
I mean, that isn't, yeah. Okay.
I think that's up to the city in their determination. You can either give it to them or charge them for it.
Okay.
Sammy? I thought I saw
I
it. There
have
she
a
is.
feeling you might be speaking to my residents and my alley over off of Miller and Lincoln. I'm guessing just by what it sounds like. There is an alley between my house and a piece of property that they are getting ready to burn down. that does have a structure that is built in the middle of the alley. There is a fence line in the middle of the alley, and it has been used by both neighbors, but it has always been very clear to us that that is the city right of way and the city alley. And if infrastructure needed to go through, it would go through. And I think that's true on, I know that the city, and Brian would probably remember more, probably, well, about 5 years ago, spent a lot of time mapping out some of these alley violations and looking at what we could possibly do with that. But I think it's a big problem.
I'd like to clarify my earlier response. You can have dedication of easements or in fee. If the dedication is an easement and then it was vacated, then the property owners would automatically take to the center of the property. They wouldn't have to purchase it. But if it was dedicated to the public in fee, then the city could make a determination at the time of vacation whether to charge them or just let them have the property.
Did we lose everybody?
Patty, yeah.
Patty?
I'm not hearing anything.
I think because just nobody's speaking.
Oh, I thought the city attorney was speaking still, and it just went.
I did. Could you
silent.
not hear me?
I
didn't hear the last part.
I heard you,
That's okay.
Gary.
It's fine.
Okay.
Counselors, again, it's another issue that we could look at or have staff get back to us. It would be interesting to see about what the report or information that Sammy was talking about that we found several years ago, certainly, and then look at it. There's so many issues that we've got coming up that I hesitate to keep piling on the agenda items, but I would at this point trust staff to be looking at this and maybe come back to us if it's a issue that we have to look at council.
Yeah, my only question was, is this something that the city council would decide on?
And Gary said yes. Okay, any other questions for department heads or Ann on the administration report? Okay, moving forward to the financial report. Tim.
All right, can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
All right, everything's working then. That's great. Yeah, so what we have before you guys is a financial report, and this is through the month of October. It's going to be very similar to the one I gave at the last meeting. At this point, November is when we start receiving the bulk of our taxes. So it's not surprising that even though we're a third of the way through the year, our revenues are only at 17%. That's going to change greatly next month. And our user fees are both above where we would like them to be, which is always great. I don't have a lot to say on this. If there's specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The next report will be more interesting, I think.
Oh, some tax revenue numbers in that one.
Yes, and so far our taxes are the same as they were at the last report. There hasn't been a December tax payment release yet. I checked that about 20 minutes ago to see.
Great. Any questions for Tim? Councilor Lehman.
Just probably a stupid question, but on the Key Bank public sector statement, can you just explain what merchant services line items are? Is that a
on page
company,
59?
or is that pardon me?
Is it page 59?
57. 57, 58, 59.
Are you asking? Sorry, we asked the question again, John. Sorry.
Yeah, I just don't know what merchant services incorporates. Is that just
on the deposits? Those are credit card deposits from credit card processing.
Okay, so that's a processing company?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Key capture deposits would be checks that we scan in. And then there's cash deposits as well when you see, oh goodness.
so merchant services deposits are from a variety of sources. It's just lumped into merchant services.
That's
It's not,
correct.
not identified out to specific.
We have, sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. We do have specific, we have 3 different types of accounts. We have the city account and we have a court account. And then there's a smaller account that gets used. I'm trying to figure out what that is. So, and I've never asked you that. What is that account that is very, very small?
Yeah, so we have 3 visa services. One, and like Tim said, we have the primarily utility billing, the court, and then the other one is for development services through planning. So we contract with the state permitting service, which requires us to take visas online, and then so merchant services are our collection of revenues, all revenues of the city by visa.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Tim on the financial report? Counselor Bell.
I have too many computers going and I can't figure out what I'm doing. I was trying to use my mouse. That doesn't work on my iPad. But I forget periodically. Yeah. So question, when does the refinancing come through? Has that all been settled?
Yeah, that is completed. We actually have just gotten the numbers to FCS to give a report, I think in the February. The plan is to give it in February to what's going to do the rates and how things are going to look going forward. That's as long as they can get the report completed, and it sounds like they'll be able to. I just spoke with them today, and we are on track to have a report in February, unless somebody else has heard otherwise. Ann, have you heard from them at all? Okay, so I think we're in good shape. So hopefully next meeting we'll have some really good news.
Great. Any other questions from council? Thank you, Tim. Citizens Inquiry Quarterly Report. Sammy. I'm sure she's trying to bring it up now. Sammy?
Yes.
Okay.
What?
As long as I hear something.
Yeah, I just was in Larry's office. What did you need?
You're up.
You're up.
Quarterly report for the Citizens Inquiry.
Oh, okay. So it's just a written report. It's a report. The report just outlines the process that the staff follow for processing the citizen inquiry reports. Council requested that the report be presented to you guys on a quarterly basis. So this is that report.
What is the chicken issue?
Anne?
My life right now.
The chicken issue. So we have a commercially zoned property has chickens and rabbits, and there's been some complaints filed by the neighbors. So some enforcement is going because it is not a permitted use in that zoned area.
Right. This is one of those items that I have on my board for the ad hoc committee to look at because our code needs to be strengthened in the commercial districts. We do not allow livestock, which includes chickens and rabbits and any kind of furry animals, according to ORS. And so there's been a bit of a struggle in a neighborhood in Coburg that we're trying to help with. So.
Any other questions from council?
So,
Councilor Bell.
The property line building issue, is that what we had discussed previously?
That is not, there's more information to here. That is something that a complaint was filed or a question was filed about a builder in one of our neighborhoods that had removed a fence on a vacant lot and done some, they had dug and did some kind of trenching through there. And so their question, it was kind of twofolded. Part of it was for the police department. Can they actually remove our fence and do this without asking? And then the other part was, I believe, for Public Works to look at to see if they had any anything in their permit to allow them to be digging on their property and doing that trenching.
Other questions? Hearing none. Council comments. Councilor Blaine.
I just wanted to thank the staff for all the hard work through this COVID stuff and putting together the Zoom and everything. I mean, you guys have done a great job. And also to Chief Larson, I think the police force has done an incredible job with their limited resources. And I hope that we can all continue to find a way to have them produce more income so we can get more coverage in Coburg and create a safer community. So I just want to say thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Councilor. Other comments from councilors? Councilor Fox.
I just want to thank everyone for bearing with my technical difficulties all night. So I was in a car.
You made it a little lighter. Thank you, John. Councilor Alexander.
I just have to say, I want to say it earlier, but I'm really excited about Patty and John being in the ad hoc meetings. I think it's exciting to have both of them specifically. I think they really do care a lot about our city. So I'm very much appreciative for them taking the time to do that. And I'm really happy with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
we'll
you
tell you
much.
how it went if we're like inundated with too much.
I didn't realize that had to do with chicken and rabbits, but that's
yeah.
I do have a significant list that I'm sending in as a citizen, but I know you guys will do very well. Again, all of the members have some good experience and background to really just move through this.
Sorry, did I
So I'm
leave my
looking
phone in
forward to
there?
it.
I have one more.
Sammy,
It's muted.
you need to mute. Go ahead, Councilor Alexander.
And I'm gonna butcher it, but Weichart, the builder that's building at the end of
Weichert.
Weichart. When are we going to hear more from them as far as what their directions are, what they're thinking, what they're doing? Or do we have to wait till a final report?
Yeah.
So that was approved. It needs to go back to Planning Commission this next month. And then they go into the appeal process where there's appeal period, whether or not it'll be appealed. So I'm assuming that we're not going to hear anything until it goes back to Planning Commission. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
And do we need to know anything about the follow-up questions or no?
You know, I think it's at this point for City Council, it's kind of what we shared before, and that is that whenever any of this comes and there is an appeal process, that you be aware of that and know that and make sure that if you're having conversations regarding it, that you're recording them. You're keeping the date, who you talk to, so that, because you may have to report that out. If you don't want to do that, then you need to, the mayor has good recommendation of just saying, I could be put into a quasi judicial position. And so there is a public hearing and you have the ability to comment and I encourage you to do it. So it's up to you what you want to do. We won't, so, but at this point, just be making sure that even if you visit the site to look at it, you need to record that you visited the site on the date. So that's where you should be as a council right now is making sure that you realize that you could become quasi judicial, and you will have to report any kind of contacts you've made regarding that. And City Attorney Gary, do you want to add anything more than that?
No, it's just important if you do have ex parte contacts, you try to memorialize the substance. And then at the council meeting, if there is an appeal, all you have to do is declare that you had the contact, indicate the substance as you can remember it, and then indicate that you can still perform your duties in an unbiased manner.
Okay.
And I want to emphasize that it's not a big deal to report that you have these ex parte contacts. It's not a bad thing. It's just putting that out on the public record that you had other discussion outside of the public meeting. So don't think that's a bad thing. If you have a discussion, write it down and report it.
Okay.
Counselor.
So yeah, I was just curious, like as far as writing it down, just in our own notes, or should we send an email to Sammy or Ann or somebody, or should we just keep a track and then when it comes up, we just mention it?
So again, what I typically do is I just keep a log of them. If I have an email or something that comes to me, I CC Sammy with it so that she has that record. But I keep a log of all of those things, and then I do both. I make a list, I type a list up in an email, and I send it to Sammy, and then I read that in the council meeting and then make the declaration that I can make an unbiased decision.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor McConnell.
Yes, on the development, my only knowledge of it at this point is that they've changed it to 25 homes from, I can't remember what it was, 45 homes. Do we have any other information on it other than that at this point?
It was 28 homes.
28.
They did change the parkland a little bit. They did make the park committee aware of that, and the park committee was able to review it in advance and did not provide any kind of formal commentary on it. So they were accepting it as is. And it is on the eastern side. There's one lot, lot 27, that is not being developed or considered for development at this time until the transportation issue can be resolved.
And is the transportation, is it still coming through the same egress through, is it Skinner and Coleman?
Okay, did I see Councilor Blaine have his hand up again? Okay. Any other council comments or questions?
Just that I understand the Weichert subdivision revised plan just goes through Coleman, not through Skinner anymore. Is that correct?
I don't want to get too far into the details on this. I guess if you want to look into it, because we're talking the ex parte contact and possibly swaying decisions. And so could you avoid talking about that? I think I'm getting a little uncomfortable that we're getting into details and possibly discussion. Councilor Fox.
I just want to note, based on what happened with Councilor Blaine just now, it's great that you're always asking for those in favor, those against, and those who abstain, because somebody could scratch their head and it can look like they're in favor of something and they could actually, so it's good that you cover all the bases there.
I I learned that lesson the hard way when I took a vote and assumed everybody was done, and somebody asked, "Are you going to ask for the abstentions?" And so, yeah, I will always do that. And if I don't, catch me on it. I'd like to go back to a previous discussion item, and that's the ad hoc committee and the issues that were coming forward. I remind you, the counselors, that if you have issues, get them in writing and present them to this committee if you have concerns or something that you'd like them to look at. So now's the time to get that list out there of things that you would like to see them look at. Please take advantage of this committee. Councilor McConnell.
So I have a question on the committee. Who will we be hearing from as to when we meet? Who's going to be kind of leading the committee?
You'll be hearing from Megan.
Okay.
So basically what we're working on developing in a work plan for how we move it forward. And what will be covered in, then most likely you're going to hear from her to try to doodle poll good meeting times to start so we can get a first meeting scheduled.
Okay.
And so you'll hear from Megan.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? At this point, I'm getting a message from Sammy that she wants to take a picture of us while we're all here. So don't go anywhere, and smile and look your best for the next couple of minutes.
Jeez. At 9 o'clock
So I
at
just
night.
wanted to get the council just for a social media post saying, here's what we're doing right now. So
We could all turn off our video.
no. Camera. It's the Brady Bunch picture.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. I think that's it. See nobody raising their hand, so I'm going to call it. We're going to adjourn at 9:08. Thank you, counselors and staff. Appreciate it once again. I think we do a great job, and thanks for the input. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Take care.
Right.
Good night, everybody.